The quantum resonance chamber of the Qatar surveillance ship Razor's Edge hummed with an almost imperceptible vibration. Commander Krulax's three-fingered hand hovered over the primary communication array, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the cold blue light of the ship's interior. He had seen countless civilizations come and go, most snuffed out before they could even dream of interstellar travel, others collapsing under the weight of their own technological hubris. But this signal was different. It had first appeared as a barely perceptible anomaly, a whisper of electromagnetic radiation that most car communication specialists would have dismissed as stellar background noise. But Krulax was not most specialists. His reputation among the Qatar military was that of an obsessive, a hunter who could track the faintest trail across the vast emptiness of space. The transmission burst through their advanced quantum filters like a wild creature breaking through a carefully constructed cage. "Analyze," Krulax commanded, his translator device converting his complex series of clicks and subharmonic rumbles into standard galactic communication protocol. Lieutenant Zaravex, the ship's primary communication analyst, looked puzzled. Her secondary eyes, a Qatar evolutionary adaptation that allowed simultaneous directional perception, narrowed in concentration. "Commander, this is unusual." The audio feed crackled to life, and what emerged was nothing like the precise, mathematically structured communications the Qatar were accustomed to. Instead, a cacophony of sound exploded through the ship's communication systems. "And I will always love you, Wu." Krulax instinctively recoiled. The sound was raw, emotional, carried on a wave of what humans would call music. But to Qatar ears, it was a discordant assault of pure, unbridled expression. The transmission continued, shifting with a speed that defied logical communication patterns. One moment, a dramatic musical piece. The next, a rapid-fire discussion about something called baseball statistics. Then a weather report. Then a commercial about a product designed to clean household surfaces. "Is this some form of code?" Zaravex asked, her voice a mixture of confusion and growing fascination. Krulax leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the communication console. "No," he responded, a rare note of uncertainty in his voice. "This is something else entirely." The Qatar had encountered hundreds of civilizations in their expansive galactic history. They had protocols for first contact, carefully developed strategies for assessing technological and cultural development. Those protocols now seemed laughably inadequate. Another burst of sound, this time a human voice discussing the intricacies of making a perfect sandwich, complete with passionate arguments about bread selection and the precise angle of mayonnaise application. "They're broadcasting everything," Zaravex muttered. "Absolutely everything." Krulax's primary brain processed the information while his secondary cognitive node, a unique Qatar evolutionary advantage, began constructing preliminary threat assessments. But something about these transmissions defied standard analysis. The sheer unpredictability, the wild range of topics, the complete disregard for what any rational species would consider important communication. It was maddening. And yet, beneath the chaos, there was something else, a complexity, a vibrancy. "Track the origin," he ordered. "I want to know everything about the source of these transmissions." The star charts began to shift, quantum positioning systems locking onto the signal's point of origin. A blue-green planet came into focus, unremarkable by most stellar standards. But something about it felt different. The planet's designation would soon change from a series of scientific coordinates to a name that would become legendary: Earth. Krulax didn't know it yet, but the universe was about to become far more interesting than he had ever imagined. Lieutenant Vornak gripped the navigation console with all four of his reinforced limbs, crystal-like exoskeleton plates shifting in response to the violent atmospheric interference. The Qatar had invaded, carefully studied, hundreds of planets. This should have been routine. It was anything but. Their advanced cloaking technology, capable of rendering the Phantom Striker completely invisible to most planetary detection systems, was being systematically dismantled by what could only be described as the most aggressive atmospheric conditions any of them had ever encountered. "Quantum stabilizers are failing," shouted researcher Kryn, her secondary neural cluster working overtime to process the incoming data. "These electromagnetic disruptions defy all known planetary atmospheric models." The ship had entered Earth's atmosphere over a region the humans casually called Tornado Alley, a name that meant nothing to the Qatar when they first selected the landing zone. Now, it was a nightmare of wind, electricity, and pure, unbridled planetary fury. Lightning arced around the ship's hull, not in predictable patterns, but in wild, almost sentient strikes that seemed designed to tear apart their technological defenses. Each bolt carried enough electrical potential to fry most advanced navigation systems, yet the Phantom Striker's designers had prepared for extreme conditions. Or so they thought. A particularly massive wind current, which would later be recorded as a Category 5 tornado, caught the ship broadside. The vessel, designed to withstand the crushing pressures of gas giants and the radiation storms of dying stars, began to tumble. Compensatory stabilization. Vornak roared, his voice a complex series of clicks and subsonic frequencies that would sound like nothing more than static to human ears. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Specialized equipment, each piece worth more than entire planetary economies in the galactic trade markets, began to break free from their quantum lock knoutings. A container of rare xenobiological samples crashed to the floor, its contents spreading in a phosphorescent pool that would have been beautiful if not for the impending disaster. "We're going down," Kryn stated with the clinical detachment of a Qatar researcher, even as her body automatically locked into emergency preservation mode. The crash was anything but elegant. The Phantom Striker carved a massive trench into the Oklahoma landscape, throwing up a massive plume of dirt, grass, and fragments of advanced alien technology. Where a lesser species might have been completely destroyed, the Qatar ship maintained partial structural integrity, a testament to their advanced engineering. What they didn't expect was what happened next. Before the dust had even settled, before the ship's emergency systems could fully activate, human vehicles began to appear. Not military transports, not emergency response teams, but a collection of modified trucks and SUVs driven by individuals who looked more excited than concerned. "Storm chasers," Kryn muttered, reviewing the initial sensor data. "Humans who deliberately pursue the most dangerous atmospheric conditions for the purpose of observation." The concept was so alien to Qatar thinking that it took several moments for the meaning to fully process. These humans were driving toward a crash site that should have been lethal, with nothing more than cameras, communication devices, and a seemingly infinite supply of enthusiasm. The first human to approach the ship was a woman in her early 30s, wearing what appeared to be a complex but relatively primitive protective suit. She carried a high-resolution camera and was live-streaming the entire encounter. "Holy shit, guys," her voice crackled through their communication systems. "You are not going to believe what just landed." Vornak looked at Kryn. Kryn looked back. Neither of them had been trained for this. Dr. Vexnar of the Qatar Xenobiological Warfare Division had spent 3 centuries perfecting the ultimate pathogen. His reputation among the Qatar scientific community was unparalleled. A master of genetic engineering whose biological weapons had brought entire civilizations to their knees in mere planetary cycles. Humanity would be different. They would be a challenge. The virus was a masterpiece of destructive engineering. Designed with quantum-level precision, it targeted the most fundamental aspects of cellular reproduction. Its genetic structure was so complex that it could theoretically bypass any known biological defense mechanism. Each viral particle was a microscopic weapon of unprecedented sophistication, capable of adapting and mutating faster than any immune system could possibly respond. "This," Vexnar told his senior research team, "is perfection." The deployment was meticulously planned. A series of carefully engineered viral particles would be introduced through multiple vectors: water systems, atmospheric dispersal, subtle contamination of food supplies. The Qatar had done this countless times before. Civilizations would fall before they even realized they were under attack. What they didn't account for was Emma Rodriguez, a 17-year-old high school student from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Emma was spending her summer internship at a local research hospital, working under Dr. Elena Martinez, a virologist with a reputation for unconventional problem-solving. When the first viral samples began to appear in preliminary medical screenings, most researchers would have followed standard protocol. Emma live-streamed the entire research process. "Okay, Internet," she announced to her growing online audience, "we've got something weird happening. And by weird, I mean seriously cool viral mutation that does not look like anything in our current databases." Her initial analysis was streamed with a mixture of scientific precision and teenage enthusiasm. She moved between complex genetic sequencing and occasional dance breaks, explaining advanced virological concepts while wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon virus doing the moonwalk. Dr. Martinez watched with a mixture of professional pride and barely contained amusement. Within 48 hours, Emma and her team had not just identified the viral structure, but begun developing a comprehensive counteragent. The Qatar's sophisticated weapon was being systematically decoded, analyzed, and neutralized by a group of researchers who approached the challenge with a combination of scientific rigor and almost playful creativity. The viral particles that were meant to destroy humanity were instead becoming the basis for a breakthrough in adaptive medical technology. Vexnar received the first reports of the viral failure through the Qatar Intelligence Network. The transmission arrived with a series of data packets that made no sense, scientific reports interspersed with what appeared to be internet memes and a video of a cat playing a keyboard. "Impossible," he muttered, his primary neural cluster struggling to process the information. But it was happening. Not only had humanity survived the most sophisticated biological weapon ever created, but they were already turning it into a scientific opportunity. The virus that was supposed to be a weapon of destruction was being transformed into potential medical advancements. To make matters worse, Emma's live stream of the entire process had gone viral, quite literally. Millions watched as she explained the complex genetic breakdown, punctuated by her occasional jokes and a running commentary that was part scientific explanation, part stand-up comedy. The Qatar biological warfare experts had a term for what had just happened. It roughly translated to catastrophic systemic failure beyond computational prediction. Humans would probably just call it Tuesday. The planet designated X742 was a geological nightmare that had systematically destroyed every probe the Qatar had ever sent. Imagine a world where volcanic activity wasn't just a geological feature, but a constant, murderous performance. Sulfuric acid lakes bubbled beneath skies perpetually choked with toxic gases. Surface temperatures fluctuated between molten and merely hellish, with environmental conditions that would vaporize most known life forms within seconds. It was perfect. Commander Karel of the Qatar Exploratory Division selected this world as the ultimate test for the human species. Previous reconnaissance missions had reduced their most advanced robotic probes to nothing more than exotic metallic puddles. No biological entity had ever survived more than 3.7 standard minutes on the planet's surface. "They will break," Karel told his senior staff. "And in breaking, they will prove their limitations." The human research team arrived with what could only be described as inappropriate levels of enthusiasm. Dr. Maya Chen, the mission's lead scientist, adjusted her adaptive environmental suit with the casual attitude of someone preparing for a moderately challenging hiking trip. Her team of 5 researchers looked more like they were preparing for an extreme adventure than a potentially fatal scientific expedition. "All right, team," Maya announced over their communication channel. "Let's go see what this geological nightmare is hiding." The car observation team watched through long-range quantum sensors, expecting a swift and brutal demonstration of human mortality. Their advanced tracking systems were calibrated to record every moment of what they believed would be a catastrophic failure. What they witnessed instead defied every computational model in their database. The human team didn't just survive. They thrived. Maya's adaptive suit, a marvel of human engineering, used a combination of nano-adaptive materials and real-time environmental compensation that the Qatar had never considered possible. When sulfuric acid rained down, the suit's outer layer transformed, creating a molecular barrier that not only protected the wearer, but actually began to analyze the chemical composition of the acid. "Guys," Maya's voice crackled with excitement, "you are not going to believe the geological data we're collecting." Her teammate, Dr. Rodriguez, was literally doing a victory dance on a surface that should have melted him instantaneously. The thermal adaptive footwear he wore created a localized energy field that not only prevented him from being incinerated, but was simultaneously collecting geothermal data. The Qatar observers watched in mounting disbelief as the human team set up collection points, deployed sensor networks, and maintained a constant stream of scientific commentary. They were treating a planet that had destroyed their most advanced robotic probes as nothing more than an interesting field research opportunity. At one point, Maya paused her scientific collection to take a selfie with an erupting volcano in the background, giving a thumbs up and adding a caption about workplace views that would later go viral on human social media platforms. "This is impossible," Commander Carell muttered, his advanced computational brain struggling to process the data. But it was happening. Humans were not just surviving in an environment that should have killed them instantly. They were enjoying it. As if to further prove their point, the team's communication channel was filled with casual conversation, scientific discussions, and occasional jokes. They were collecting more comprehensive data in hours than the Qatar had managed in decades of observation. When Maya finally called the mission complete, she signed off with a casual, "Great day at the office, team. Who's up for pizza?" The Qatar scientific community would spend years trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The humans would simply call it another Tuesday. The Qatar Xenosociological Research Division had perfected the art of cultural observation over millennia. They could dissect the social structures of civilizations with surgical precision, reducing complex cultural systems to neat, mathematically predictable patterns. Humanity broke every single one of their models. Dr. Zaravin, the lead researcher, had specifically selected her most adaptable team for this mission. They would embed themselves in human society, using advanced holographic disguise technology that could perfectly mimic human appearance and biometric signatures. Their first target, a location humans called a shopping mall in a mid-sized American city. The mission briefing had been straightforward. Observe, analyze, understand. What followed was anything but straightforward. Senior researcher Krell discovered the concept of food court samples first. The idea that humans would willingly line up to receive tiny portions of food from enthusiastic employees, solely for the purpose of tasting before purchasing, was incomprehensible. He found himself returning to the same sample station 17 times, not for nutritional purposes, but because the concept was so fascinatingly illogical. Researcher Miratak was drawn to something called a video game arcade. The sensory overload was extraordinary. Humans willingly subjecting themselves to complex interactive experiences that served no apparent survival or reproductive purpose. Young humans would spend hours pressing buttons, competing in virtual environments, experiencing simulated challenges that provided no tangible benefit. Their training, Miratak reported back to base, but for what, we cannot determine. The team's linguistic expert, Dr. Jex, found himself completely overwhelmed by human communication. Their language was a labyrinth of idioms, sarcasm, and contextual nuances that defied all known communication models. A simple phrase like "break a leg" could mean encouragement, while "that's sick" was actually a positive statement. But the true breaking point came during what humans called a professional wrestling match. The event was held in a massive arena, filled with humans displaying an incomprehensible range of emotional states. Massive individuals in elaborate costumes engaged in what appeared to be a complex performance that was simultaneously a sport, theatrical drama, and ritualistic combat. "Is this a battle?" Krell asked, utterly bewildered. "A simulation of a battle," Miratok responded, equally confused. "But also not a battle." The wrestlers moved with choreographed precision, telling an elaborate story through physical performance. The audience responded with a level of emotional investment that made no logical sense. They cheered, booed, held elaborate signs, and participated in a cultural ritual that seemed to simultaneously celebrate and mock the concept of physical conflict. One wrestler dramatically lifted another over his head, then dramatically threw him across the ring. The audience erupted in a complex symphony of screams, cheers, and what could only be described as ritualistic vocal expressions. Dr. Zuravin's final report would later become legendary in Qatar academic circles, a 500-page document that ultimately concluded with 3 words that would be discussed for generations. Humans make no sense. But beneath the confusion was a growing sense of something else. Respect. Fascination. An understanding that the universe was far more complex than any of their previous models had suggested. Humanity was not just a species to be studied. They were a constantly evolving, magnificently chaotic phenomenon that defied every established rule of cultural development. The United Nations Special Extraterrestrial Engagement Chamber was not what the Qatar Diplomatic Corps expected. Instead of the rigid, hierarchical meeting space they had prepared for, the room seemed designed to be simultaneously formal and utterly unpredictable. Ambassador Krulax of the Qatar Galactic Diplomatic Corps arrived with 247 years of interstellar negotiation experience. He had brokered peace treaties between civilizations that had been at war for millennia. He had mediated conflicts that would have destroyed lesser species. He was, by all Qatar standards, the pinnacle of diplomatic excellence. The human delegation looked like they were preparing for a game show. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead human representative, greeted the Qatar delegation with what could only be described as weaponized enthusiasm. "We thought we'd do something a little different," she announced, her eyes sparkling with a combination of professional excitement and barely contained mischief. The challenge was simple, yet completely incomprehensible to the Qatar understanding of diplomatic engagement. "We're going to have a problem-solving competition," Elena explained. "The goal is to rebuild a complex communication system using only the materials in this room. The losing team performs a talent show for the other." Ambassador Krulax's translator device momentarily glitched, unable to process the concept. A diplomatic encounter was now a competition, with potential public performance as a penalty. The room was filled with an assortment of seemingly random objects: staplers, paperclips, whiteboards, several half-empty coffee mugs, a collection of stress balls, a vintage typewriter, multiple laptop computers, a ukulele. The Qatar team looked at the items with growing confusion. The human team looked like they were about to start the most exciting game of their lives. "Teams of 5, Elena continued. 45 minutes. Most functional communication system wins." What followed was a display of human ingenuity that would be discussed in Qatar diplomatic circles for generations. The human team moved with a synchronized chaos that defied all Qatar understanding of collaborative work. They didn't assign roles in a traditional hierarchical manner. Instead, they seemed to communicate through a complex dance of suggestions, rapid-fire ideas, and what could only be described as organized spontaneity. Dr. Marcus Chen took the ukulele and began using its strings as part of an impromptu electrical conductor. Sarah Patel was using paperclips to create a surprisingly robust circuit board. The team's youngest member, a 24-year-old engineer named Raj, was repurposing the coffee mugs as acoustic resonance chambers. The Qatar team approached the challenge with their traditional methodical precision. Each member worked in a carefully defined role, following a predetermined strategy that had succeeded in countless previous diplomatic encounters. They were completely unprepared for human creativity. With just 3 minutes remaining, the human team had constructed a communication system that was part electrical network, part musical instrument, part computational device. It could transmit complex messages using a combination of electrical signals, sound waves, and what appeared to be an elaborate musical code. The car system was technically perfect but functionally static. When time was called, the Linus team had created something that was simultaneously a communication device, a musical instrument, and a work of performance art. Ambassador Krelax could only stare in bewildered admiration. "So," Alina said with a broad grin, "who's ready for our talent show?" The Qatar diplomatic corps would never be the same. The Qatar High Council had designed a test that had systematically destroyed every species they had ever encountered. It was more than a mission. It was a comprehensive evaluation of a civilization's absolute limits of survival, technological adaptation, and psychological resilience. Simulation Nexus X9 was a marvel of technological engineering. Spanning multiple artificial environments, it combined the most extreme conditions from across known planetary systems. Imagine a single space where the environmental challenges shifted faster than most species could comprehend, from the crushing pressures of a gas giant's core to the radiation-blasted surface of a neutron star's proximity, from absolute zero temperatures to plasma-level heat, all within moments. No species had ever survived more than 17 standard time units. The human team's preparation was anything but standard military protocol. Dr. Maya Chen, leading the mission, approached the briefing with a mixture of scientific excitement and what could only be described as anticipatory joy. Her team of 5 looked more like they were preparing for an extreme adventure than a potentially fatal mission. "Okay, team," Maya announced during the final preparation. "This is going to be epic." Their equipment was a testament to human innovation. Adaptive nanomaterial suits that could reconfigure themselves faster than the environmental changes. Quantum-linked communication systems. Portable research stations that could be deployed and reconfigured in microseconds. But what truly set them apart was something no technological advancement could fully explain: their psychological approach. As the simulation began, Qatar observers expected to see fear, panic, or at least a systematic breakdown of human capabilities. Instead, they witnessed something entirely different. The first environmental shift, a sudden transition to an atmosphere composed of corrosive gases that should have dissolved organic matter instantly, was met with a burst of laughter from one of the team members. "Anyone else getting serious bad day at the office vibes?" Dr. Rodriguez called out, his adaptive suit shimmering as it reconfigured to counteract the corrosive environment. Their communication channels were a bizarre mix of scientific observation, dark humor, and what could only be described as casual conversation. They were collecting more comprehensive data in minutes than the Qatar had managed in decades of observation. When a sudden gravitational anomaly should have crushed them, the team's response was to start an impromptu singing competition. "I call dibs on best survival song," shouted Marcus, the team's quantum systems expert, as he simultaneously adjusted their protective field and launched into a surprisingly good rendition of Queen's "Don't Stop Me Now." The Qatar observation team's computational systems began to overheat trying to process what they were witnessing. As environmental conditions shifted, pressures that should have atomized them, temperatures that should have vaporized their protective gear, radiation levels that should have stripped away their molecular structure, the human team continued to not just survive, but transform each challenge into an opportunity for discovery and, inexplicably, entertainment. Dr. Maya Chen paused at one point to take a selfie with what appeared to be a plasma storm in the background, adding a caption about workplace views that would later go viral on human social media. When the simulation finally concluded, the human team had not only survived, but had collected more scientific data than any previous expedition. Their final communication to the Qatar observers was both a scientific report and a challenge. "Same time next week. We're thinking of bringing snacks." The Qatar High Council would spend years trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The humans would simply call it another Tuesday. The Qatar High Council chamber fell silent. The holographic projections of humanity's various achievements hung in the air, a mosaic of impossibility that defied everything they had ever known about intelligent life. Grand Archon Krell, the oldest and most respected member of the Qatar leadership, slowly rose from his crystalline seat. His movements were deliberate, weighted with the wisdom of thousands of planetary cycles. In all our recorded history, he began, his translation device converting his complex series of clicks and subsonic frequencies into standard galactic communication. We have never encountered a species quite like humans. The council chamber was a monument to galactic conquest. Holographic memorials represented hundreds of civilizations the Qatar had encountered, studied, and ultimately integrated or eliminated. Each projection told a story of systematic exploration, calculated assessment, and ultimate domination. Humanity's file was different. Every traditional Qatar assessment metric had failed. Technological analysis, inconclusive. Psychological profiling, impossible to categorize. Survival potential, beyond computational prediction. Dr. Zaravin, the lead cinesociological researcher, presented her final report. It was not the typical structured document the council was accustomed to. Instead, it was a collection of seemingly random observations, video logs, scientific data, and what could only be described as cultural artifacts. There was a video of humans performing spontaneous acts of kindness, scientific breakthrough documentation interspersed with internet memes, complex mathematical equations alongside recordings of musical performances, footage of humans risking their lives to save other species, even those that pose no direct benefit to their own survival. They are not just a species, Zaravin explained. They are a phenomenon. The breakthrough came not through military might or technological superiority, but through something the Qatar had never truly understood: genuine curiosity about the universe combined with an almost reckless capacity for empathy. Humanity had not conquered the Qatar. They had fundamentally changed their understanding of intelligent life. The final recommendation was unprecedented. Instead of the traditional protocols of observation, integration, or elimination, Zaravin proposed something radical: a comprehensive alliance based on mutual understanding and collaborative exploration. They will challenge everything we know, she concluded, and that is precisely why we must embrace them. The holographic displays began to shift. Scenes of human achievements played out, scientific discoveries, artistic expressions, moments of both incredible violence and profound compassion. A species that could develop world-changing technologies and then use those same technologies to solve global challenges. Grand Archon Krell raised his primary manipulative appendage, a gesture of ultimate respect in Qatar culture. "We will learn from them," he declared. "Not conquer, not study, learn." The decision was unanimous. Humanity would not be categorized, controlled, or contained. They would be understood. They would be engaged with. They would be recognized as something entirely new in the universe, a species that didn't just adapt to challenges, but transformed those challenges into opportunities for growth. As the council adjourned, a final transmission came through. It was from the human diplomatic team, a video message that was part official communication, part joke, part scientific observation. "So," Dr. Elena Rodriguez said, grinning directly into the camera, "want to grab a coffee and chat about the universe?" The universe would never be the same.